My own parents looked me in the eyes and told me I was a worthless failure, then shoved my suitcase out the front door and locked it. "Go live in the streets, maybe that'll teach you something," my mom said. I stood there, numb, staring at the house I grew up in, realizing I didn't have a home anymore. Let me take you through everything that happened that night and how my life changed after. If this story hits close to home, make sure to like, share, and support the channel. My name is Samantha Riley, but everyone calls me Sam. I'm 21, and I had just lost my college scholarship because of a financial aid mistake, something completely out of my control. I'd always dreamed of becoming a graphic designer, but now that dream felt like it was slipping through my fingers. My parents, Karen and Douglas Riley, never made me feel good enough. They were always cold and obsessed with status, comparing me to my younger sister Maya, who seemed perfect in every way. That night, everything came to a head. I hadn't even gotten a chance to explain or defend myself before my mom grabbed my suitcase and threw it onto the front porch. My dad followed, shaking his head as if I were some kind of punishment for their lives. I remember Maya watching from the upstairs window, silent and wide-eyed, her small face pressed against the glass. I could see the confusion in her eyes, but she didn't intervene. I guess she was too scared of what would happen if she spoke up. I stepped onto the porch, my hands shaking, clutching the few things I had. $42 in my wallet, my old laptop, and 2 garbage bags stuffed with clothes. My whole world reduced to a few belongings. The door slammed behind me, and a cold emptiness settled in my chest. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the echoes of my parents' harsh words and trying not to cry. The street outside suddenly felt like the only place I could go, but I had no plan, no idea how I would survive. As I walked away from the house, my mind was spinning. How had it come to this? How could the people who were supposed to love me treat me like I didn't matter at all? Every step I took away from that front door felt heavier than the last. I kept thinking about Maya and hoping she'd be okay, but also wishing someone, anyone, would just tell me that I wasn't as worthless as they claimed. I didn't know it then, but that night would mark the start of a journey that would change me forever. I had nothing, but for the first time, I was completely free. Free to make my own choices, to fight for myself, and to prove to the world, and maybe even to my parents, that I could rise above everything they said about me. The first night was the hardest. I curled up on a cold park bench, hugging my jacket around me like it could somehow protect me from the dark. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car horn, made my heart jump. I kept imagining shadows moving, people walking by with eyes on me, and I didn't even know if I could shout for help if something happened. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, and I hoped it was a friend checking in, but it wasn't. I tried calling a few people I thought I could count on. Maybe someone would let me crash for a night, or at least hear me out. But each call ended the same way. Polite rejections. "I'm sorry, Sam, I can't. I just don't want the drama." Drama. That's what I had become. A burden. The word stuck in my mind, twisting in my stomach as I tucked the phone away. Hungry, I walked a few blocks to a vending machine and fished out the last of my $42. I bought a small bag of chips and a soda, and rationed it so it would last at least 2 meals. Sitting on the park bench, eating slowly, I realized how little I had left and how much I had to rely on myself. The night air was cold, the city lights distant, and I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. As I stared at the asphalt, memories of my parents came flooding back. They had always compared me to Maya, their perfect daughter. Straight A grades, soccer trophies, a flawless social life. Nothing I did was ever enough. Every mistake I made, every slip-up, was a reminder of how I supposedly failed them. I remembered the dinners where they would whisper praises about Maya in front of me, their words sharp and cutting. It hurt more than I thought possible, and now, lying alone on a park bench, it all made sense. Why I had been cast out like I didn't matter at all. Just as I was trying to pull myself together, I overheard a conversation between 2 men walking past me. "Hey, did you hear about Frankie's diner? They hire anyone, doesn't matter what your past is," one said. "Yeah, they just want someone who shows up and works hard," the other replied. My ears perked up. A job that didn't care about grades, college scholarships, or whether your parents thought you were a failure. It sounded almost too good to be true, but at that moment, it was like a tiny spark of hope in the dark night. I tucked that information away, holding it close like a lifeline. For the first time since being thrown out, a small thought crossed my mind. Maybe I could find a place to belong. Maybe I could start over, even if it meant beginning at the very bottom. The city around me was noisy, harsh, and unforgiving, but for the first time, I felt the faintest sense that I might survive. One bench, one vending machine snack, and one overheard conversation. Those were my tiny steps out of the darkness, though I didn't realize it yet. The next morning, I followed the directions I had overheard and found myself standing in front of a small diner tucked between two old brick buildings. The sign read Frankie's Diner, faded but inviting. My stomach was still empty from the night before, but I stepped inside anyway, hoping the place was real and the conversation I had overheard wasn't just wishful thinking. Inside, the smell of frying bacon and brewed coffee hit me, and for a moment, I forgot I was homeless. Behind the counter stood a man who looked like he had seen a lifetime of hard work etched into his face. Frankie Ramirez. He was gruff, with a thick mustache and a serious gaze, but there was something in the way he looked at me that made me think he understood more than I could imagine. "I need a job," I said, my voice shaking slightly. I can work hard." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "You start today. Storage room's free for a night, but you work your ass off, you hear?" That was all I needed. I nodded, relief washing over me in a wave so strong, I almost cried right there in the diner. Frankie handed me an apron and a notepad, and I learned the ropes fast, refilling coffee, clearing tables, taking orders. The work was long, 14-hour shifts that left my feet aching and my hands raw, but every dollar I earned felt like a lifeline. I began to understand the value of money in a way I never had before, counting every cent, saving every tip, storing a little more each day. For the first time, my own efforts meant something. The storage room wasn't much. A narrow space with a mattress on the floor, stacked boxes, and a single lamp, but it was mine. I could lock the door behind me and sleep without fear, even if only temporarily. I made it as comfortable as possible, setting my laptop and the few belongings I had carefully in. Then came the night I couldn't hold it in anymore. The diner was quiet, the hum of the refrigerators and the occasional clatter from the kitchen the only sounds. I slipped into the walk-in freezer to escape the heat and the smell of fried food, and as I leaned against the metal shelf, I finally let myself break down. My shoulders shook, and tears ran freely as I realized that in all this time, my parents hadn't called. Not once. They hadn't checked to see if I was alive, or if I was cold or scared or hungry. Not one phone call, not a single word of concern. It hurt more than I expected. The anger, the abandonment, and the betrayal came together in that small, cold room, leaving me feeling raw and exposed. But even in that moment of despair, there was a strange clarity. I realized I had to rely on myself and the people who actually cared, people like Frankie. I promised silently, through my tears, that I wouldn't let their neglect define me. I would work, save, and survive, and someday they would see that they had thrown away someone who refused to be broken. That night, I left the freezer feeling exhausted, cold, but somehow stronger. Frankie's Diner wasn't just a job. It was the first real chance I had to rebuild, and I was determined not to waste it. After a few weeks at the diner, my routine was solid. Wake up in the storage room, work the long shifts, sleep, repeat. But even with the exhaustion, my mind wouldn't stop wandering back to the thing I loved most, design. I still had my old laptop, and after my shifts, I started bringing it out in the quiet hours, sitting at one of the corner booths with a cup of coffee. It started small, just doodling logo ideas, playing with fonts and colors, reminding myself that I still had a skill, even if the world seemed to think otherwise. One night, a customer saw me sketching and asked what I was working on. I told him it was just a hobby, but he leaned in and said, "My cousin just opened a landscaping business. You think you could make him a logo?" That was my first real side project. I didn't charge much, just enough for a few meals, but when I handed over the finished design, his smile told me I was worth something. Soon, word spread through customers at the diner, and I found myself doing small projects for a bakery, a mechanic, even a dog grooming shop. Frankie noticed. One slow afternoon, he sat across from me and said, "Kid, you've got something. But listen, you gotta learn to run it like a business, or people will eat you alive." That was the start of our unofficial lessons. He'd tell me how to negotiate payment, how to read people, and most importantly, how not to let anyone take advantage of me. He didn't sugarcoat things. If my work looked sloppy, he said so. If my price was too low, he told me to raise it. It was strange having someone believe in me without strings attached. Frankie never asked for anything in return except that I work hard and take myself seriously. Little by little, the confidence I'd lost when my parents threw me out started to come back. One night, after finishing a logo for a small coffee cart, I sat alone in the booth and whispered to myself, "If my parents think I'm worthless, I'll make sure they choke on my success one day." It wasn't said in anger as much as determination. I wasn't chasing revenge for the sake of it. I was chasing proof. Proof that they were wrong about me all along. The next week, I walked into a bank with $312 in cash and opened my very first savings account. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My name, my money, my control. I remember holding the little passbook they gave me like it was made of gold. For the first time in my life, I wasn't under my parents' thumb. No one could tell me how to spend it. No one could take it away. That account wasn't just about money, it was about freedom. And as I walked out of the bank, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It started with an email that almost didn't feel real. A trendy coffee shop downtown, the Roasted Bean, had heard about my work through the owner of the coffee cart I'd designed for. They wanted a full rebrand, logo, menu, packaging, the works. I stared at the screen for a long time, half expecting it to disappear like some kind of dream. I met with the owner, a lively woman named Harper, who spoke about her shop like it was her child. "We need something fresh," she said, sliding a latte across the table toward me. "Something that feels warm but modern. I've seen what you've done. You've got the eye." Her words lit something in me I hadn't felt in a long time. For the next 2 weeks, I poured everything into that project. Early mornings at the diner, late nights sketching at my laptop, researching color palettes, studying typography. When I finally walked into the Roasted Bean to deliver the final design, my heart was pounding. Harper looked at the mock-ups, then at me and grinned. "This is it. This is exactly what I wanted." She didn't just pay me on the spot, she offered me more work. Seasonal menus, merch designs, even social media graphic. I walked out of that coffee shop with my first real paycheck and a feeling I couldn't put into words. For once, I wasn't scraping by. I was earning from something I loved. With that money, I finally took a step I'd been dreaming about, moving out of the storage room at Frankie's diner and into a modest studio apartment. It was small, just one main room with a kitchenette and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, but it was mine. I bought a secondhand couch, a small desk for my laptop, and a thrifted lamp that gave the place a cozy glow. Sleeping in a real bed again felt like luxury. I started investing in myself, too. I bought clothes that fit well and made me feel confident. I swapped vending machine snacks for groceries and fresh produce, cooking simple meals that made me feel healthier and stronger. Each little change was like a brick being laid in the foundation of a new life, one that was mine alone. One night, after unpacking the last of my things, I sat on my bed and opened my wallet. Tucked in a hidden slot was the only family photo I still carried. It was from years ago, me, Maya, Mom, and Dad at a park. Back then, I had thought it was a happy day. Now, all I could see were the cracks. The way my mother's hand rested lightly on my shoulder like she was posing, not holding me. My father's distracted gaze. The faint, unsure smile on my own face. Without hesitating, I tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. It wasn't an act of hatred, it was letting go. I didn't need that picture to remind me of where I came from. I was building something better, and this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. The invite came from Harper, the coffee shop owner I'd worked with. She told me about a small local business networking event and insisted I come. "You never know who you'll meet," she said, handing me a ticket. I almost didn't go. Crowded rooms full of strangers still made me nervous, but something told me to push myself. The venue was a renovated warehouse filled with booths, banners, and the low buzz of conversation. I wore my best outfit, hair neatly done, portfolio tucked under my arm. Walking in, I felt a quiet pride. A year ago, I'd been sleeping in a storage room. Now I belonged here. I was chatting with a small bookstore owner about a possible logo redesign when I felt someone staring at me. I turned, and there she was, Maya, my little sister. Her eyes widened like she'd just seen a ghost. "Sam," she said, almost unsure. I smiled. "Hey, Maya." She took a step closer, looking me up and down. "Wow, you look different." Her voice carried a mix of surprise and confusion. I could see her scanning my fitted blazer, polished shoes, the confidence in my stance. "I've been busy," I said simply, keeping my tone even. We found a quieter corner, and after a few awkward silences, she started talking. "Things at home, they're not great." She fiddled with the strap of her purse, avoiding eye contact. "Mom and Dad, they made some bad investments. Really bad. The bank's talking foreclosure." I let her words sink in. The same people who had tossed me out without a second thought, who hadn't called once to see if I was alive, were now on the brink of losing everything. "That's rough," I said, nodding slowly. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, there was a flicker of satisfaction I couldn't ignore. Not joy exactly, but a kind of poetic justice. Maya looked at me like she was waiting for me to say more. Maybe she thought I'd offer help, or at least sympathy. I didn't. I just sipped my water and asked about her college classes, steering the conversation away. After a while, she excused herself to go find her friend. As she walked away, I caught my reflection in one of the venue's glass doors. Healthy skin, steady posture, eyes that no longer looked unsure. I realized that for the first time in my life, Maya was the one looking at me from a position of uncertainty, not the other way around. I didn't feel guilty for not offering. I'd learned the hard way that some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. And as I turned back to mingle with other business owners, I felt a quiet smirk tug at the corner of my lips. Life had a way of balancing the scales, and I didn't need to lift a finger. It happened one quiet evening, about a week after the business event. I was at my desk, finishing up a logo draft for a new client, when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hello. There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. Sam, it's your mother. For a second, I didn't say anything. My hand froze on the mouse, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I'd imagined this moment so many times, what I'd say if she ever called. Now it was real. Her voice was different, smaller, trembling. We need your help. Your father and I, things have gotten bad. The house, the bank is threatening to take it. We need a loan to save it. I leaned back in my chair, letting her words sink in. The family home. The same house where they had shoved me out the door with my suitcase and told me to go live in the streets. Now it was suddenly worth saving because it was slipping away from me. How much? I asked, keeping my voice calm. 40,000, she said quickly, as if saying it faster would make it sound smaller. We'd pay you back, of course. We just need to get the bank off our backs. We're family, Sam. We have to help each other. That last sentence almost made me laugh. Family. The word sounded so hollow coming from her. My heart was racing, not from fear, but from the strange satisfaction of hearing the shift in power. This was the moment I had pictured lying awake in the storage room at Frankie's, them needing me more than I could ever need them. I took a slow breath, making sure she could hear the pause. I'll think about it, I said finally, each word measured. There was a beat of silence on the other end. I could almost hear her swallowing her pride. Please, Sam, don't take too long. The deadline is close. I'll be in touch, I replied, then ended the call before she could say another word. I sat there for a long time after, staring at the darkened screen of my phone. A part of me felt a rush of victory, but another part felt oddly empty. This wasn't about money. It was about everything that had happened before. All the years of being compared to Maya, dismissed, ignored, then finally thrown out like garbage. I didn't owe them anything, and now, for the first time, they knew it. I went back to my work, letting the tension in my chest settle. They could sweat. They could wonder. And I would decide, not them, how this story ended. I drove past my old neighborhood on a gray afternoon, the kind where the clouds hung low and the air felt heavy. My parents' house stood at the end of the street, looking smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling in long strips, the shutters sagged, and weeds had taken over the once manicured lawn. It was strange. This place had once felt like a fortress, and now it just looked tired. When I knocked, the door opened almost instantly, and there was my mother, smiling so wide it looked unnatural. Sam. Oh, honey, it's so good to see you. Her voice was sticky sweet, like she was trying to make up for years of silence in a single sentence. My father appeared behind her, equally cheerful, though his eyes flickered with something else, desperation. They ushered me inside, and I noticed right away how bare everything looked. A few pieces of furniture were gone, and the framed pictures on the walls were crooked. The air smelled faintly of dust. My mother gestured toward the couch. Sit. I'll get you some tea. I stayed standing for a moment, scanning the living room, the same one where I'd been told to pack my bags and leave. Eventually, I sat, and my father leaned forward with a practiced smile. We've been hearing about you, he said. Your business, your clients. You've really made something of yourself. The way he said it made it clear they'd done their research. My mother returned with tea, setting a cup in front of me. We're so proud, she added, her tone just a little too rehearsed. Then came the real reason I was there. My father cleared his throat. Sam, we're in a bit of trouble. The bank, they're pushing hard. If we could just get $40,000, we could pay off the debts and keep the house. We know it's a lot, but you're doing so well now. And we'd pay you back, of course. I looked at the tea, steam curling up from it untouched. The words they were saying felt surreal. For years, I had imagined them needing me, and now it was happening. But instead of feeling tempted, I felt nothing but clarity. I met my father's gaze, then my mother's. I don't give money to people who abandoned me, I said evenly. My voice didn't shake. My mother blinked, her smile faltering. Sam. I stood, setting the tea back on the table without taking a sip. I came here to say this in person, so you'd understand it's final. Their voices rose as I walked to the door. Don't be like this, my father shouted. We're family, my mother called after me, the same people who had locked the door on me years ago. I didn't turn around. I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face, and walked back to my car. The shouts grew fainter with every step, until there was only silence and the sound of my own steady breathing. Frankie had a way of knowing people in every corner of the city, the kind of people who could make things happen quietly. A few days after my visit to my parents' house, I told him the situation over our usual late-night coffee at the diner. He didn't ask why I cared about their foreclosure. He just nodded and said, "I know a guy at the bank. If you want to make sure they lose it, I can put you in touch." The contact's name was Joe, a middle-aged man with a crisp suit and a blunt way of talking. We met in a quiet booth, and I told him I wanted to buy the foreclosure notice before it hit the open market, anonymously. I didn't want my name anywhere near it. He didn't flinch, just sipped his coffee and told me it could be done for the right price. Within a week, the papers were in motion. I watched the process unfold from a distance, making sure there were no delays, no last-minute miracles to save them. The bank was firm. Payment deadlines passed. Letters went unanswered, and soon there was no turning back. The house I had once been thrown out of was officially no longer there. 3 weeks later, I drove past. It was a bright, windy afternoon, and I slowed down just enough to take it in. A moving truck sat in the driveway, the door of the garage wide open. Strangers carried boxes inside, laughing, chatting, filling the space with a life that had nothing to do with the people who once lived there. My parents were nowhere in sight. The sight didn't fill me with glee the way I had once imagined. Instead, it felt complete. The house had never been a home to me, and now it belonged to someone else entirely. As I sat at a red light a few blocks away, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya. "I'm moving out. I can't stay with them anymore. I know things have been bad between us, but I want to keep in touch." I read it twice before typing back. "Of course. My problem was never with you." She replied almost instantly with a simple thank you. I tucked my phone away, feeling a small knot in my chest loosen. Maya had been a quiet witness to everything. Too young, too unsure to intervene back then. Maybe now she was ready to start her own life, free from their grip. As I drove off, the moving truck faded from my rearview mirror, replaced by the city skyline ahead. The revenge wasn't about crushing them. It was about making sure they couldn't hurt me anymore. That chapter was closed, and I had turned the page without looking back. The morning light poured through the tall windows of my new office, spilling golden streaks across the polished wood floor. My name was etched in clean, modern letters on the glass door. Samantha Rivera Design Company. It wasn't a massive firm. Not yet, but it was mine. Every chair, every piece of art on the wall, every client we worked with was proof that I had built something from the ground up without anyone's permission or control. 2 desks sat in the main room, both occupied by young designers who reminded me of a younger version of myself. Emily, 21, had been kicked out by her father for wasting time, studying art instead of law. Malik, 24, had bounced between foster homes until he aged out of the system, never once having a stable place to call his own. I didn't hire them out of pity. I hired them because they were talented, hungry, and understood that hard work could change everything. But still, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing my little company was a refuge for people who needed a chance. I'd come a long way from the girl who slept on a park bench and rationed change for vending machine snacks. Back then, the thought of owning my own firm seemed impossible, just a distant dream I used to draw in the margins of my notebook. Now, it was my everyday reality. Clients came to us for our clean, bold designs, but they stayed because they could feel the energy we poured into every project. As I stood by the window, watching the city wake up below, I thought about that night, the night they threw me out. I could still see the porch light cutting through the cold darkness, my mother's tight expression, my father's crossed arms. I could still hear the door shutting behind me. For years, that moment haunted me, a wound I thought would never close. But now I saw it differently. That was the day I was set free. Free from their rules, their constant comparisons, their belief that I would never be enough. Freedom had been terrifying at first, but it forced me to build a life entirely my own. I had earned every step forward, every dollar, every client, and I had done it without bending to anyone else's will. I glanced at the clock, 8:59. Emily and Malik were already at their desks, sipping coffee and laughing about something on Emily's screen. I stepped into the main room, my heels clicking against the floor, and the sunlight followed me in. "Morning, boss," Malik said with a grin. I smiled back, the weight of my past feeling lighter than ever. "Good morning," I said, setting my bag on my desk. Then I turned to Emily. "Let's make something amazing today." And just like that, we got to work. What about you? Do you think Sam made the right choice by cutting ties for good, or should she have given her parents another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear your take. And if you love powerful stories of resilience and revenge, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're the first to know when a new one drops.